looking to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good afternoon, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila and Bangkok. Hello, Gila.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Gila Pablo, bringing you the latest news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. British tycoon Richard Branson today urged Singapore to spare the life of a mentally disabled Malaysian facing execution.
Indonesia raised the alert status for the upspring of the infamous Krakatoa volcano to its second highest level on Monday, a day after it erupted and spewed a towering ash cloud 3,000 meters into the sky.
And to the latest in the war in Ukraine, Russia has warned of the real threat of World War III breaking out ahead of a meeting between the U.S. and allies over sending further arms to war-torn Ukraine.
We're here. Later, we'll head to Texas, where a mom's dream becomes a reality, one Asian dish at a time.
First in our news, British tycoon Richard Branson today urged Singapore to spare the life of a mentally disabled Malaysian facing execution, telling AFP the death penalty was a horrible blotch on the city-state's reputation. In an interview, Branson, a longtime campaigner against the death penalty, urged Singaporean President Halima Yacob to grant Naginthran clemency. Let's listen in.
And we just begged her to grant him clemency, and also we beg her to reconsider whether whether in this day and age Singapore should I hear they're now going to execute yet another person on Friday, whether they should be in the business of hanging people. I mean, it's just so inhumane. It's the one horrible blotch on its reputation, and. If I was running a company and I had a ghastly blotch on my reputation, I would get rid of it. And I think the way to get rid of it is to do what Europe did 70 years ago, and that is abolish the death penalty altogether. To do what most other civilized countries have done and civilized states have done, and that is to abolish the death penalty altogether. I think it's the one thing about Singapore that is really negative, and I have enormous respect for Singapore, for Singaporeans, for the government of Singapore. I cite the government as an example of a really well run the way to run a government. I've been against the death penalty most of my life. I think it's it's inhumane, and I don't think civilized countries should be in the business of killing their own people or killing anybody. He was an extremely young man when he was convicted of carrying 3 tablespoons, effectively, of diamorphine, and he's got an IQ of under 70, and on that basis alone, he should not be killed because he's a handicapped individual, and that under international law is against the law.
Mr. Branson, who is part of a group with other business leaders that campaigns against capital punishment, said they were urging the president to pardon Naginthran. Naginthran K. Dharmalingam convicted of trafficking a small amount of heroin into Singapore, is due to be hanged on Wednesday after more than a decade on death row. While the president's role is largely ceremonial in Singapore, Halima has the power to grant clemency, which is effectively Nagenthran's last chance to be spared after exhausting the usual appeals process. Nagenthran, now 34, was originally scheduled to be executed in November, but lodged an appeal that was finally rejected by Singapore's top court last month. Supporters say he has an IQ of 69, a level recognized as a disability, and was coerced into committing the crime. But authorities have defended his conviction. They said that legal rulings found he knew what he was doing at the time of the offense. His mother will mount a further legal challenge at Singapore's Court of Appeal later today, and chances of success look slim. But Mr. Branson urged the judge hearing the case to have some humanity for the mother of this young man. Hundreds of Singaporeans held a vigil to protest the looming execution of 2 Malaysians convicted of drug offenses as the United Nations urged the city-state to spare them. Take a look.
Why did you not still change a law for the small scale of drugs? Because their intention is not to harm people or destroy the families. Actually, the intention is not that. They want to earn some little money because of their family situation or whatever financially. Because okay, I think the Singapore government is act unfairly to my brother's case. He bought a small amount of drug. They gave him a death penalty, which is very unfair to him and for the family also. He's already suffering in the prison about 11 years plus. I think this punishment is more than enough for him.
When the state takes away a person's life, it is the state that takes this life away in our names, because we are a democratic state, and I don't believe in that, and I disagree. I disagree that anybody has the right to take another person's life away, and that's why I'm here to remember Nagenthran and others like him. Because as we all know, he is someone with like lower IQ and things like that, and the vulnerability of his position is really palpable. And I think that's why, like many others here, like this case really strikes a chord with all of us.
If they have done a crime and they're going to be punished, it doesn't need to be death. They can be rehabilitated in jail, and they can lead very fulfilling life, contributing to the society while alive. Just killing does not make sense.
Nagenthran Darmalingam, a mentally disabled man arrested in 2009 for heroin trafficking, is to be hanged today, or on Wednesday rather, despite an international outcry. Another Malaysian, Daci Mamorth Waikataya, is scheduled to be executed 2 days later, according to campaigners. More than 400 Singaporeans gathered late Monday at Speaker's Corner in a downtown park, the only place in the tightly controlled city-state where protests are allowed without prior police approval. A few dozen activists and local political party supporters in Kuala Lumpur demanded the release of the mentally disabled Malaysian man on death row in Singapore. Again, let's listen in.
We are all here today presented, and we are here to actually with one motive and one heart, that is to save Nagenthran and save his family as well, who are there praying for him, and we are all together praying with him, and we hope he's saved and he's well back to Malaysia. Stop the execution. So we all shall pray that he will come back safely to Malaysia, and we will stop this execution. And as a family, and I'm sure you can see behind us, there's a lot of families here praying and waiting for his safe return to Malaysia.
Yeah. He will be sent to the gallows on the 27th of April. So we're here to show our displeasure of the Singapore's government's action in going ahead with his execution, despite the fact that he is an intellectually disabled man, despite the fact he can do or whatever the government can do to help Nagandan, they should do, and they should do it now, because time is short. His life will end if we do nothing.
As earlier mentioned, Naganthran was arrested in 2009 for trafficking a small amount of heroin into Singapore, and after losing a last-ditch appeal, will be hanged in the city-state Wednesday. Last month, the city-state conducted its first execution since 2019 when it hanged a drug trafficker, and fears are now growing that several more people will be put to death in the coming months.
Indonesia raised the alert status for the upspring of the infamous Krakatoa volcano to its second highest level on Monday, a day after it erupted and spewed a towering ash cloud 3,000 meters into the sky. Authorities bumped the threat of Anak Krakatoa, which means child of Krakatoa, to level 3 of 4-tier volcanic alert system after witnessing a sharp rise in activity in the last month, with the biggest eruption coming on Sunday. They also widened the exclusion zone around the crater a day after warning nearby residents to wear masks outside because of the large plume of ash it belched over the strait that separates the islands of Java and Sumatra. Authorities said a significant spike in carbon dioxide emissions has also been reported at the crater. It emitted 68 tons on April 15, but more than a week later, on April 23, it emitted more than 9,000 tons. No evacuations have been reported on nearby islands, and Gunawan said the busy sea route for Java's Merak port to Sumatra's Bakauheni port was unaffected. The volcano has been sporadically active since it emerged from the sea at the beginning of last century in the caldera formed after the 1883 eruption of Mount Krakatoa. That disaster was one of the deadliest and most destructive in history, with an estimated 35,000 people killed. Anak Krakatoa last erupted in 2018, generating a tsunami that killed 429 people and left thousands homeless. 3 critically endangered Sumatran tigers were found dead in western Indonesia on Sunday after being ensnared by traps, police said, dealing another blow to the species' rapidly declining population. Let's listen in.
Kita mendapatkan informasi dari teman FKL bahwa di wilayah hukum kita ada matinya 2 ekor harimau Sumatera. Kemudian kita langsung ke TKP, ternyata benar. Sampai sekarang kita masih standby di lokasi untuk mengamankan keaslian dari TKP tersebut sambil menunggu tim BKSDA dari Banda Aceh, juga tim dokter untuk memastikan apa penyebab.
2 of the dead tigers were first found by local conservationists in Aceh, which sits on the northern tip of Sumatra Island, before police were alerted. Authorities found the 2 intact tiger carcasses next to each other with their feet ensnared by steel slings at a palm oil plantation in East Aceh district. A few hours later, police found a 3rd dead tiger about 500 meters away from where the other 2 tigers were discovered. Its feet were also ensnared by a sling and the body had started to rot. Officials will conduct autopsies to determine the causes of the tiger's deaths. Rampant deforestation has reduced the tiger's natural habitat, and increasing conflict with humans has left only several hundred of the endangered species remaining in the wild, according to estimates. Meanwhile, Malacanang is saddened by the decision of the Commission on Elections to no longer push through with the conduct of the final presidential and vice presidential town hall debates. In a press statement, acting presidential spokesperson and communications secretary Martin Andanar described the move as unfortunate, noting that debates enable voters to evaluate potential leaders and their policies. Some presidential and vice presidential candidates is slated to attend the debates originally set on April 23 and 24 were non-committal following the COMELEC's change of plans. Misunderstandings between COMELEC's contractor for the debates, Impact Hub Manila, and the management of Sofitel Philippine Plaza were said to have caused postponements and eventually the cancellation of the debates. The COMELEC received a complaint from the management of Sofitel about Impact Hub Manila's failure to settle venue fees. Impact Hub Manila failed to settle its 14 million Philippine pesos debt to Sofitel, where the last debates were supposed to be held. COMELEC Commissioner Ray Bulay is currently leading an investigation into the matter. Garcia said should the COMELEC find the contract with Impact Hub Manila disadvantageous, the contract could be canceled. The firm could be blacklisted or a complaint for damages may be filed.
In other news, Nobel laureate Jose RamosHorta vows to use dialogue to find solutions for East Timor after scoring a landslide victory in the country's presidential election. Based on official preliminary results, let's listen in.
I will do what I always have done throughout my life, as I did in 2007, 2012 when I was president. I will always pursue dialogue, patiently, relentlessly, to find common ground, to find solutions to the challenges this country faces, to strengthen our democratic institutions and to strengthen good governance, and to respond to the basic expectations of our people who never ask too much. With our parliament, we will try to see how we can respond fast in the face of the current economic financial troubles in the world.
The 72-year-old secured 397,145 votes, or 62.09% against incumbent Francisco Luwolo Gutierrez, 242,440 or 37.91%. The Secretariat's website showed after all ballots were counted. The victory gives RamosHorta his second term in office. He served as president of Southeast Asia's youngest country from 2007 to 2012 and was also the country's first prime minister. RamosHorta will be inaugurated on May 20, the 20th anniversary of East Timor's independence from Indonesia, which occupied the former Portuguese colony for 24 years. The Nobel laureate benefited from the backing of Xanana Gusmao, the country's first president and current leader of the National Congress of the Reconstruction of Timor-Leste, often a kingmaker in East Timor. RamosHorta was awarded a Nobel Prize for Peace in 1996 for his efforts in facilitating conflict resolution in the country. In 2008, he survived an assassination attempt. The new president faces the daunting task of lifting the country out of poverty. East Timor is still reeling from the economic impact of the pandemic, and the World Bank has said that 42% of the population lives below the poverty line. And the news continues. They're on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
Tapula ka! Saputi ako! Larga! Pula, sa puti. Anong kaguluhan to? Masama ang sugal. At eleksyon ngayon, kaya bawal yan.
Ayon sa Omnibus Election Code, ang pag-organisa ng mga perya, sabong, boxing o kahit anong kaganapan na may sugal ay isang election offense.
Pwede yan. Nagre-relax lang naman kami. Bukod sa masama ang sugal, importante din sa alala ng ating buong atensyon. Dapat hindi tayo nadidistract ng mga panalo ko! Pakawalan niyo ako! Hindi na ako uulit. Ako si Mr. Bawal na nagpapaalala sa inyo na ang sugal, election man o hindi, huy! Bawal yan!
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Welcome to Mobile Legends!
Minsan sa bayan ng pinagkaisahan, may dalawang pusong nagkaibigan. Si Binata, happy-go-lucky at nabubuhay ng kontento. Si Dalaga, maprinsipyo at hindi nagpapatalo. Pero mangingibabaw ang puso. Di naglaon, siya'y mabibigo. Hanggang muli silang nagtagpo. Sa bayan, sila'y manunuyo. Si Binata, nangakong magbabago. Sino matatalo? Si Dalaga, ayaw na magpaloko. Sino mananalo? Panalo o talo? It's you! Weeknights pagkatapos ng Mi Esperanza. Dito lang sa Net25, prime time ng pamilya. Let's get together sa init ng summer. Mananalo ba ang prinsipyo ko? Magpapatalo ba ang puso ko? Ngayong linggo, sisingilin sila ng kanilang nakaraan.
Angelito, pwede akong mapunta sa kulungan sa paraan ng pag-ampun ko sa'yo.
Kumusta ka na, payaso? Ang tagal nating hindi nagkita, di ba?
Magkano gusto mo para manahimik ka?
Bina-blackmail mo ko? Hayaan mo na ako makita si Stephanie kahit kailan ko gusto. O sasabihin kong katotohanan.
Meron ba tayong problema?
Hindi mo anak si Angelito, no?
Palabra de Amor. Dito lang sa Net25. Prime time ng pamilya. Let's get together sa init ng summer.
Welcome back. In other news, financial expert Gregory Volkine said Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter for $44 billion is not a game changer for the Nasdaq. Musk bought a 9% stake in Twitter earlier in April and then offered to buy the whole company outright, citing a mission of preserving free speech. Let's listen in.
Right line, basically. It is a $44 billion deal. It is $54.2 offer. It looks like a lot, but it's not so much for one reason. Just because of the performance of Tesla, as a salary, Musk this year going to get for $25 billion of Tesla stock. So here the money. Nobody is worried about that. Yeah, if I see a market effect of the purchase by Musk would be a little bit in the other social media stock, because publicity advertising gonna go to this other media like a Google, like a Facebook, just because Musk is going to close Twitter to publicity. But for the other big tech, the Cisco, the Intel, the Microsoft of this world, I don't see any effect, and I don't think it's enough to stop the plunge of the Nasdaq. Maybe the Nasdaq plunged too much, so it's gonna rebound. But just this purchase by Musk is not enough to change. It's not a game changer, I would say, for the Nasdaq.
If you can remember, Twitter famously served as a megaphone for former U.S. President Donald Trump before the platform banned him. And Elon Musk, a self-proclaimed free speech absolutist, has said he wants to reform what he sees as the platform's overzealous content moderation. Let's listen in.
Trump just said 10 minutes ago he doesn't want to go back to Twitter. That means he wants to go back to Twitter. You know, there are 80 million followers waiting for him. Musk, does he want Trump? It's hard to say. But if Musk is really for the freedom of speech, he cannot just not let Trump back, that's for sure. I mean, Dogecoin is an interesting thing because Musk, as a baby, this baby dog is a Dogecoin. And there's a real possibility going to introduce Dogecoin on Twitter as a currency. He doesn't buy Twitter for dollars, for money. He's not going to have advertising. So he could have this kind of cyber currency. And 330 million people are on Twitter. So if these people start to use Dogecoin for whatever service on Twitter, it could be a game changer, at least for Dogecoin.
And the whole world is looking into the developments in the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia has just warned of the real threat of World War III breaking out ahead of a meeting between the United States and allies over sending further arms to war-torn Ukraine. Speaking to Russian news agencies, Moscow's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned that the risk of a World War III is serious, and he criticized Kiev's approach to floundering peace talks. It is real. You can't underestimate it, Lavrov said. Now, for months, President Volodymyr Zelensky has been asking Ukraine's Western allies for heavy weapons, including artillery and fighter jets, vowing his forces could turn the tide of the war with more firepower. The calls appear to be resonating now, with a host of NATO countries pledging to provide a range of heavy weapons and equipment despite protests from Moscow.
In a landmark trip to Kiev over the weekend, Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin and Secretary of State Antony Blinken met Zelensky and promised $700 million in new aid to Ukraine. Let's watch this.
In terms of their ability to win, the first step in winning is believing that you can win. And so they believe that we can win. We believe that they can win if they have the right equipment, the right support. And we're going to do everything we can, continue to do everything we can to ensure that that gets.
And on the invitation of the United States, 40 countries will also hold a security summit in Germany on Tuesday to discuss further arms to Ukraine, as well as to ensure the country's longer-term security once the war is over. Among the invited countries are European allies of the United States, but also Australia and Japan, who fear that a Russian victory in Ukraine will set a precedent and encourage the territorial ambitions of China. Finland and Sweden, traditionally neutral countries that have been considering NATO membership since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, are also on the guest list. And on the Russian side, President Vladimir Putin is due to hold talks with Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Tuesday, his spokesman told via Novosti. The first deputy permanent representative to the United Nations of the Russian Federation told journalists that the Russian Ministry of Defense keeps collecting information that the Kiev regime, backed by the U.S., is preparing staged provocations in order to accuse the Russian armed forces of using chemical weapons. Let's watch this.
As you may have noticed, we do our best to keep you updated on the non-proliferation threats in Ukraine. I will be frank, the situation is very alarming. Our Ministry of Defense keeps collecting information that the Kiev regime, backed by the US, is preparing staged provocations in order to accuse the Russian armed forces of using chemical, biological, and tactical nuclear weapons. There are three possible scenarios of this. The first one is a staged incident under a false flag, an actual use of chemical or biological weapons resulting in casualties among the civilians. Another option, a staged so-called Russian sabotage, at those facilities in Ukraine where components of weapons of mass destruction were produced. The second scenario is a covert use of weapons of mass destruction by the Kiev regime and radical groups in small volumes for tactical purposes. You cannot fully exclude the third scenario, when the Kiev regime and radical groups use the weapons of mass destruction on the battlefield in case they fail to gain superiority by conventional means. I would like to stress what has long been considered as unthinkable is now a realistic scenario plotted by the Kiev regime, encouraged and supported by the USA. There are numerous indications of that. One of them is the hysteria about the possible use of chemical substances deliberately stirred up by the Western media and Western politicians. On this point, I would like to encourage you to stop and think out of this propagandistic fog of war. Even if we set aside a proven fact that Russia does not possess any chemical or biological weapons, what is the rationale for using them in Ukraine, in the close proximity to the Russian border?
Russia on Monday accused Kiev of preventing civilians trapped with Ukrainian soldiers in Mariupol's Azovstal steelworks from leaving the besieged industrial center, despite a ceasefire announcement. The Defense Ministry had said it would allow a civilian evacuation from Mariupol's sprawling steel plant, which has been sheltering the remaining Ukrainian resistance in the southeastern port city. But the Russian army on Monday evening said no one used the proposed humanitarian corridor.
In a related news, answering a journalist about the possibility of a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, this is what Mr. Polyansky had to say.
As you may have noticed, we do our best to keep you updated on the non-proliferation threats in Ukraine. I will be frank, the situation is very alarming. Our Ministry of Defense keeps collecting information that the Kiev regime, backed by the US, is preparing staged provocations in order to accuse the Russian armed forces of using chemical, biological, and tactical nuclear weapons. There are three possible scenarios of this.
All right, we go to other news. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un vowed to strengthen the country's nuclear weapons program during a speech at a high-profile military parade in Pyongyang, according to state media. Take a look. According to KCNA, Kim gave the speech late on Monday at a parade marking the 90th anniversary of the founding of the Korean People's Revolutionary Army at Kim Il-sung Square in Pyongyang. KCNA said the parade had showcased the North's most sophisticated weaponry, including the Hwasong-17, which it claims to have successfully tested on March 24. North Korea is under biting international sanctions over its nuclear weapons program, and repeated negotiations aimed at convincing Kim to end it have come to nothing. Kim on Monday said the country's nuclear weapons were a symbol of national power and that the country would further strengthen and develop nuclear force at the highest possible speed. Pyongyang has carried out more than a dozen weapons tests this year, including firing an intercontinental ballistic missile at full range for the first time since 2017. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
Nakalimutan mo na naman yung payong? Saan mo naiwan?
Hindi ko nga maalala eh. Kung naalala ko yun, hindi ko makalilimutan yung payong.
Lahat na lang nakakalimutan mo. Paano ka boboto ng mga kandidato kung makakalimutan mo ang lahat?
Pwede pong magdala ng kodigo sa araw ng halalan. Sa bahay pa lang, isulat nyo na po kung sino-sino ang karapat-dapat na kandidato. Isa pa, kung may dala kayong kodigo, mas mapapadali ang inyong pagboto at maaga kayong makakauwi. Mag-asawa po ba kayo?
Tingnan mo, pati ako nakalimutan mo. Mag-asawa tayo.
Eh, yan pala yung payong mo.
Hep, hep! bago po kayo magdiskusyon, mabuti pa bumili na lang po kayo ng balot sa akin. Malay niyo po, pati po first kiss. Maalala niyo po, kakain ng balot.
Halika nga, kumain na tayo ng balot.
Para sa karagdagang kaalaman, makipag-ugnayan lang sa pinakamalapit na barangay o bisitahin ang COMELEC website.
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na
Welcome back. The first deputy permanent representative to the United Nations of the Russian Federation told journalists that the Russian Ministry of Defense keeps collecting information that the Kiev regime, which is also backed by the U.S., is preparing provocations, staged provocations, in order to accuse the Russian army of using chemical or tactical weapons. Let's listen in.
As you may have noticed, we do our best to keep you updated on the non-proliferation threats in Ukraine. I will be frank, the situation is very alarming. Our Ministry of Defense keeps collecting information that the Kiev regime, backed by the US, is preparing staged provocations in order to accuse the Russian armed forces of using chemical, biological, and tactical nuclear weapons. There are three possible scenarios of this. The first one is a staged incident under a false flag, an actual use of chemical or biological weapons resulting in casualties among the civilians. Another option, a staged so-called Russian sabotage at those facilities in Ukraine where components of weapons of mass destruction were produced. The second scenario is a covert use of weapons of mass destruction by the Kiev regime and radical groups in small volumes for tactical purposes. You cannot fully exclude the third scenario, when the Kiev regime and radical groups use the weapons of mass destruction on the battlefield in case they fail to gain superiority by conventional means. I would like to stress what has long been considered as unthinkable is now a realistic scenario plotted by the Kiev regime, encouraged and supported by the USA. There are numerous indications of that. One of them is the hysteria about the possible use of chemical substances deliberately stirred up by the Western media and Western politicians. On this point, I would like to encourage you to stop and think out of this propagandistic fog of war. Even if we set aside a proven fact that Russia does not possess any chemical or biological weapons, what is the rationale for using them in Ukraine, in the close proximity to the Russian border?
Russia on Monday accused Kiev of preventing civilians also trapped with Ukrainian soldiers in Mariupol's Azovstal steelworks from leaving the besieged industrial center despite a ceasefire announcement. The Defense Ministry had said it would allow a civilian evacuation from Mariupol's sprawling steel plant, which has been sheltering the remaining Ukrainian resistance in the southeastern port city. But the Russian army on Monday evening said no one use the proposed humanitarian corridor. Also, answering a journalist about the possibility of a ceasefire, this is what Mr. Polyansky had to say.
So there was a call for ceasefire, and we opened humanitarian corridors which are not being used by Ukraine, and Ukraine is also compromising our efforts to open these corridors. So we don't think that ceasefire is a good option right now, because the only advantage it will give possibility for Ukrainian forces to regroup and to stage more provocations like Bucha.
Brunei has announced new protocols for air travel, doing away with a travel green list and the need for quarantine upon arrival in Brunei. In a press conference, the Minister of Home Affairs, YB Pehindato HJ Ag Abu Bakar Apong, said there will be no longer different health protocols based on travelers' departure country, only vaccination status. From May 6, the following new rules will come into effect, which is 1, all vaccinated travelers will be allowed to enter, exit Brunei. For non-essential travel, the travel green list will be withdrawn. Number 2, all travelers entering, exiting Brunei must be boosted with a 3rd vaccine dose or have taken a 2nd dose within the past 3 months. Travelers entering to Brunei no longer have to quarantine as long as they produce a negative ART result upon arrival. They will also be required to perform an ART on day 2 and 3. PCR tests are no longer required for vaccinated travelers.
Myanmar's junta chief calls for face-to-face peace talks with the country's established ethnic rebel groups as the military struggles to crush newer anti-junta militias that have sprung up to fight the coup. Let's watch this.
တိုင်းလက်နက်ကိုင်အဖွဲ့များရဲ့ခေါင်းဆောင်များကိုတွေ့ဆုံဆွေးနွေးဖို့အတွက်ဖိတ်ခေါ်ပါတယ်။အဖွဲ့များအားလုံးကိုကျွန်တော်ကိုယ်တိုင်တွေ့ပါမယ်။တိုင်းဒေသပြည်သူအားလုံးငြိမ်းချမ်းရေးနဲ့ဖွံ့ဖြိုးတိုးတက်မှုရဲ့အရာတာကိုခန်းစားနိုင်ရေးကျွန်တော်တို့အားလုံးလက်တွဲပြီးရိုးသားပွင့်လင်းစွာဆွေးနွေးသွားကြပါမယ်။
Myanmar has about 20 ethnic rebel armies, many of which control swathes of remote border territory that have fought each other and the military for decades over the drug trade, natural resources, and autonomy. Some have condemned the ouster of Aung San Suu Kyi's government and offered shelter and weapons training to People's Defense Forces that have sprung up since the push and which analysts say have surprised the military with their effectiveness. The call comes amid daily clashes between junta troops and PDF groups, some of which are fighting alongside ethnic rebels in border areas. More than 1,700 people have been killed in a military crackdown since the coup, according to a local monitoring group. The Bureau of Customs on Monday reported the seizure of fake luxury brand items and unregistered health products amounting to close to 300 million pesos in Las Piñas and Manila. CIIS Director Geoffrey Tasho said the confiscated clothing items, such as shorts, pants, t-shirts, polo shirts, and baby apparel, and bottles of perfumes infringe on intellectual property rights. The CIIS IPR division seized smuggled counterfeit and unregistered health products with an estimated value of 31.5 million pesos in 2 separate operations on April 19 in Santa Cruz, Manila. Armed with letters of authority, the implementing team, composed of personnel from Port of Manila, NBI National Capital Region, and Armed Forces of the Philippines, inspected the warehouses located along Ongpin and Fernandez streets. Let's head to Texas, where a mom's dream becomes a reality, one Asian dish at a time. Here's Jane Kathleen Gregorio.
We're here at Hom Hom Cafe in Corpus Christi, Texas, where we discover how a mom fulfilled her dream of building her own restaurant an Asian fusion cilantro-themed eatery inspired by her son.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm the owner and executive chef here at Hom Pom Cafe. Hom Pom means cilantro in Laotian. It's a nickname that was given to my son by his family from Laos.
After working almost every job in the restaurant field for more than 15 years, Jessica Lemos decided it was time to spread her wings and start her own dream restaurant. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, Hom Pom Cafe opened its doors in 2021 with a strong outpouring of support from the community. Using original Southeast Asian recipes taught to her by family members, Jessica brings to the table both traditional flavors as well as her own unique twist.
Cilantro is prominent in the cuisine, and I thought that it was cute and it all just kind of came together. We serve a variety of Asian cuisine, but we specialize in the Thai and Laos dishes. Pho, curry, ramen. I think the thing that we're most proud of is our chicken wings. They're jumbo Asian marinated wings. We cook them from fresh, so it takes a little while, but I promise it's worth the wait. So my son Zeke, he inspired the entire restaurant, the menu, the cuisine, the drinks, but he's not just the inspiration for the restaurant, he's also my best customer.
Hi, my name is Zeke Tongsawan, and we're here at Hom Pom Cafe. And the wide variety of drinks we have here of the tea are bubble tea, taro, butterfly, and hibiscus. And then we have a very big selection of dishes here, but my favorite dish here and a key factor here are the chicken wings.
What are we looking at now? We have the signature wings, but they do look super crisp, so I expect a good flavor. Burst of flavor and crispy goodness. It's good.
What is this? What? Tiny. Oh my gosh.
All right, cheers. Is it called the Hom Pom because it's giving its name justice?
This is called the Thai nap, but yeah, it's full of cilantro.
Oh my goodness, it's yummy.
Is it like a cilantro lover's dream come true?
Yes, it is, and that would be me.
They just brought out the curry. So, Adriana, what can you say?
Oh, it looks really, really good. It's hot, steaming. It's cold outside, so I'm pretty sure that this is going to be really good to have. That's amazing. I didn't know flavors could do that. Everything's just dancing in my mouth. So good. Thank you for introducing me.
Jane Kathleen Gregorio, Eagle News.
Thanks, Jane, and thank you for keeping me company as always, Gila.
Welcome, Alma. And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. And join us once again tomorrow here in ASEAN in Focus. And thank you again for joining us. I'm Gila Pablo, and we live in an extraordinary time.
Thank you, Gila. We'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same place, here on ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in extraordinary times.